because college basketball, listen to what I'm saying, Coach, this has no effect on the allure of college basketball during the season. But March Madness, the madness of March, owns sports.
Anybody that has been following college athletics, anybody that has been following what the destruction of college athletics, this planned demolition, this college athletics, particularly men's college athletics, it's building 7.
We'll do it. Okay, let's move to the tournament itself as opposed to the coaches. Okay. Did we know that it was going to be heavily favored for the favorites? And Reese, a lot of people are saying NIL and transfer portal and everything like that potentially killed Cinderella stories forever. Is that real?
So we have ourselves a pretty interesting topic here. Will NIL, will it actually kill off Cinderellas? Now, guys, I want to go ahead and preview this video by saying that this video right here is not going to be a full-blown breakdown of NIL. If you've not actually heard about it or actually been exposed to it, I know enough about it to know that it can very, very well destroy college sports as a whole. However, that right there is a different video for another day. This right here is more about the Cinderella topic. However, I will be linking this video right here in the description box, as well as this guy's follow-up video in the description box as well, because he actually properly explains NIL and the problems with it. However, there are people out there who make the argument that there's some positives with it, which I'm pretty sure I'll be exploring some of that in this video here, but I want you guys to know right now that this video here for the most part is to ask the question, will it actually kill off Cinderella teams? So, Sweet 16 on Thursday night. And it looks to me like pretty much all the big programs that were involved in this year's NCAA tournament have gotten to the Sweet 16, which has got a lot of people asking the question, will NIL actually destroy Cinderella teams, keep them from advancing any further, potentially going to the national championship game? Now, guys, before we get started, there's a bit that I'm sharing right now in the B-roll footage from Jason Whitlock. Of course, he went through the fact that there are certain teams, like, say, Davidson, for example, which Steph Curry is an alum of. By the way, me being a North Carolinian, being a Duke fan, it took me a long time to even realize that Davidson College was even in North Carolina. That right there is obviously a mistake on my end. I did not know that until that particular tournament. And, of course, you see stuff like, say, the Loyola Chicago team from a few years back, also Loyola Marymount. Of course, Cinderellas do, in fact, exist. You could even argue that Arkansas is a bit of a Cinderella, seeing how it is that they are a 10 seed and they're being coached by John Calipari, and they got over Kansas, and now they're in the Sweet 16, so therefore you could probably argue that. Or you could argue what you guys are seeing right in the B-roll footage, which was Maryland beating Colorado State, could in fact be a Cinderella story based upon the bracket that they're in. Even though if old boy does not make that shot, Colorado State more than likely wins. They're a 12 seed, they're in the Sweet 16, so therefore they are potentially a Cinderella. But we'll get to all that in a second. Now, before we get started, guys, make sure you guys, if you're subscribed, make sure you guys have got notifications on so that way you guys are notified when the videos are released. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It's the best way to support this channel for free. And also something else, too. Please hit that thumbs up button so that way the video will stand a better chance of making it to a much, much larger audience, so that way we can grow this channel. Let's go ahead and get to 2,000 subscribers. Let's get to like 50,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and let us now go ahead and get into this. So, there are a cavalcade of good takes and a cavalcade of bad takes. Now, let me go ahead and start with the rare good take that I actually fully agree with, which was from Stephen A. Smith. And, of course, I've been hard on Stephen A. on this channel, and I've been hard on him pretty much this entire week. But I think that Stephen A. Smith is actually on to something here, and I think he actually gets it right. So let's look at this.
NCAA tournament is where it's at. What I'm talking about when I allude to such a drastic, hyperbolic statement, albeit in some people's eyes, is I'm talking about the NCAA tournament. No matter what's going on during the college basketball season, if you're in Durham, you're looking at Duke in North Carolina, you're in Raleigh, you're looking at NC State, you're down and you're in the Pac-12, you're looking at Stanford, you're looking at UCLA, USC, people like that, not them anymore, not in that conference, but you hear what I'm saying. My point, Michigan and Ohio State, Big Ten, all of this other stuff. But the NCAA tournament is where it's at. And what is the appeal? What is the allure? Anybody has a chance because of Cinderella. That's what gravitates you. So when we have...
One way that this was explained to me was that the players were not actually playing for the name on the back. They weren't even really playing for the institution anymore, the college they were going to. It felt like they were playing for something else. This is part of the reason why it is that I've chose to separate this take. I'll probably come back to it maybe in a month or so to talk about NIL itself in a much, much broader term. This video, like I said, is for the most part just asking the question or looking into this and saying, hey, look, is it possible that the Cinderella story is being destroyed by NIL? But like I said, we'll get to that here in a second. But still, though, the more and more I look at this, the more and more it makes me think that maybe even the players themselves are getting screwed by this. And you're not exactly playing for yourself. You're just playing for something else, not exactly related to the institution. Just figure I'd throw that out there before we go any further, but you'll hear me say this a lot in this video. Let's get back on track. It's possible that it could eventually wipe out Cinderella teams, but we'll get to that more so towards the end because I do think that there's another approach that could be used here. Like I said, this video is more about Cinderella teams, not about NIL itself, but of course, if you know about NIL, then you know how it can be completely and totally misused. By the way, something else needs to be said, and of course, those two videos talk about this. With the NIL situation, players also get screwed over too. The players who sign the contracts, yeah, they get hosed as well. I may talk about that in a separate take because people love to cite the Ed O'Banion case when in reality it goes back much, much further. I would advise you guys watch the Fab Five documentary on Netflix. It's currently there right now, or you can watch it on Disney+. It talks about the Michigan Wolverine team that went to the national championship game in 92 and 93. They lost both times. Me as a Duke fan, I got to kind of like take a dig at them, even though I'm doing it playfully. It was a very, very good team, a lot of talent. But the topic of likeness comes up towards the very, very end of the documentary, especially when it comes to Chris Webber and the fact that he sees his jersey, his name on a mannequin in a store in Detroit, and yeah, he's wondering why he's not getting paid for it. But like I said, that right there is a different conversation altogether, a conversation that I'll probably touch on towards the end of the video, but let me get back on track. The NCAA tournament, you have 64 teams, well now 68. 64 teams have basically playing a win or go home. That's basically what it is. You win or you lose. If you lose, you go home. It's probably the hardest tournament in the world to win a national championship in. This is one of the reasons why it is that so many people will say, well, look, man, my team got to the Elite Eight. You know what? We didn't win, but you know what? We got to the Elite Eight. That right there is a hell of an accomplishment, especially given where we were at last year. You almost wish that your team would die in the Final Four instead of getting to the national championship game and losing. You almost wish that that was the case. That is kind of how this tournament operates. And, of course, if you win the national championship, if your team wins, you're obviously happy. You're filled with joy. And if your team loses, you're obviously filled with pain. It is not an easy tournament to win in, which is one of the reasons why it is that people love the idea of a Cinderella team so daggone much. I mean, seriously, folks, it's one of the most American things that you can be happy about is that this country does, in fact, love a good underdog story, and we typically tend to get one every NCAA tournament. But once again, let me get back on track. But there are going to be those out there who are going to say it's actually great for college basketball because of the ratings, and it ensures that the bigger programs are actually involved. And to go on top of that, they're going to say these are the kind of games that we would have wanted to see during the regular season. Cue Cowherd, and you guys know how I feel about Colin Cowherd, but I'm going to try everything I can to be balanced with him this time around. However, there is going to be a header over this. It's a little over a minute, and to go on top of that, Fox Sports is pretty bad about copyright, but here you go.
First weekend, viewership for the first day, all-time high. By the way, there are no have-nots. It's all power conference teams in the Sweet 16. So remember the NIL? Everybody's terrified with the NIL. NIL is actually great for college basketball because it keeps some of the better players in college for another year, like a Zach Edey. And then the big brands can cherry pick mid-major teams that nobody watches on television and get better faster. Everybody thought the NIL was going to help the little guy maybe. No, made the rich richer. Yes, America likes to watch Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, Michigan State, Arizona more than Drexel, Lipscomb, and Wofford. Who knew? But college basketball diehards through the years, and they love the sport, and that's great. And it's a little bit like, hey, I bought the iPhone for...
God, what a freaking idiot. Now, guys, I promised you that I would be unbiased when it comes to Cowherd. Well, I lied. This right here is exactly what the hell I would expect out of Colin freaking Cowherd. This right here is the same guy who not too long ago, right before, I would say it was the spring of last year, I even did a video on this, who stated that crime in California was not a big deal because he lived in a gated community, he did not experience it, and that homelessness was not a problem. Everybody knows that California is full of homeless people, and it's an absolute outright issue. And of course, I had people people who were subscribed to me who were from California saying that the guy was absolutely nuts and not living in reality. This is also the same guy who recently said he wanted to move to Chicago because Chicago was a great sports town, even though Chicago is known as Chirac because of the crime, because of the shootings. This is exactly what the hell I would expect out of a guy who contradicts himself at least 3 or 4 times a day in a segment alone. I used to listen to Cowherd. It took me about a month to figure out that he was nothing more than just a great big giant bullshitter, and that, he has a very, very bad penchant for contradictions and crapping himself. There's also the bit where he said that Brock Lesnar, he could take him, that UFC fighters weren't really tough at all, and of course, Brock Lesnar showed up on ESPN one day on the set of one and actually punked him. I'll link the full clip in the description box rather than just playing the stuff right here in the B-roll footage. But still, though, at the same time, this is the kind of nonsense that you would get out of Cowherd. But seriously, to counter what he's about to say. So you have Duke in the Sweet 16, you have Florida in the Sweet 16, you have Auburn in the Sweet 16, you have Arizona, you have a lot of bigger name schools. And on the surface, that looks good. However, there's a problem with this. And this right here is the main problem. Because I heard somebody else talk about this the other day, and they were talking about how it is that these right here are games that you would want to see during a regular season. And on the surface, it definitely feels that way. The problem is this here, though. The college basketball season itself is not that long of a season. And typically, Duke fans, for example, like myself, we typically only tend to watch Duke. We will watch Carolina because we're either A, rooting against them, or you'll have the very, very rare case where someone like myself, who's not salty about rooting for a team from his state, will still root for them, or like NC State, because I do care about the state that I live in, and I do want to see it succeed. But for the most part, people who are fans of said institution only watch their team play, and guess what? Not every single one of their games are aired. Like, seriously, I could give 2 craps about Auburn versus Florida. I could care less about Maryland versus Kansas. I could really and truly care less. But now, granted, I will watch these games when the NCAA tournament is on. Like, for example, tomorrow you have the Sweet 16 start. So I'll probably watch every game that I can throughout from here all the way through Saturday or Sunday. The point is this right here. During the regular season, college basketball fans typically tend to follow their team and their team alone, and they typically don't care to watch 2 other teams play, unless, of course, you're one of those fans who's extremely analytical, and maybe you have, I don't know, maybe you want to say bet on a team to win the NCAA championship. The point is this right here. College basketball fans typically tend to follow their team and their team alone, which doesn't surprise me. Like I said before, this right here is the same guy who said that crime and homelessness was not a problem in Southern California where he lived at. Completely and totally out of touch. That right there is the biggest problem with this take, is it's absolutely 100% soulless. And then to go on top of that, it's just not accurate, and it just goes to show you exactly how little he knows about college basketball and college basketball fans. Cowherd is what you call a sports generalist. He knows a little bit about a lot, but not a lot about one sport, or he hasn't really dug that deep into each said sport. He's also, for the most part, a bandwagon guy, and he's oftentimes quite misleading with his takes. Doug Gottlieb was a little bit better, but Doug Gottlieb was also misleading too. I didn't like him either, and of course, you guys know me. I'll never care for somebody who runs his mouth about a profession, and then all of a sudden somebody from that profession shows up and completely and totally punks his ass. But let me get back on track.
Problem. Biggest fan in the world.
Straighten something out here?
No, nothing. Never.
All right.
Call him sir, Colin.
My staff's a bunch of jerks, is what it is. I wonder what you
I
guys
don't
get
think
back.
it's real funny.
I don't think it's funny at all. It's not funny.
This makes me
Not
happy.
funny whatsoever.
He talks so much crap about you, Brock.
She is lying.
Ridiculous.
Well,
No.
He thinks MMA's fake, and you
Oh,
guys
shut up.
But go back to the beginning of this video. I talked about will NIL actually ruin the Cinderella story? Well, let's get to the take that I think is probably the most accurate, Reese Davis. Now, guys, this segment's roughly 1 minute and 30 seconds, and I'm going to let it play all the way through. But what's funny is this right here. While we had a conversation about Cinderella teams, earlier in the McAfee show, they were going on about Maryland's buzzer beater over Colorado State. And by the way, if they don't get that buzzer beater, Colorado State gets to the Sweet 16, and they could have been, quote-unquote, a Cinderella team. It's hard to say this, but it's hard to imagine, but UConn They were an 8 seed, and they took Florida to school. Of course, Dan Hurley blames the refs on why it is that they lost that game, but in reality, they lost because they missed 22 three-pointers, and that was the real reason why they lost the game. Or, like, if you want to have a gripe about any team that may have gotten screwed by the refs, look at Gonzaga. I think that they're the team that may have gotten hosed by the refs. But still, though, the point is this here. That right there could have been a Cinderella story, even though they were 8 seed. I mean, UConn, they're 2-time national champions, but of course, let's say they knock off Florida, then people are looking at them and potentially maybe getting to the NCAA championship game. Just saying, it could have been. But I think Reese here is the one who nails it.
It's an overreaction, you think, to potentially what's happening right in front of us, Reese?
I think that there is some truth to it, but I don't believe that it's killed it forever, because the guys who are having opportunities to move up have to be at the other level at some point, and you're going to have the Cinderella teams that have veteran guys, as we've had in the past, make runs. I mean, almost saw it with Colorado State last night. I think there will still be Cinderellas. I do think it will be maybe a bit more rare than it's been in the past, simply because, I mean, look, every team that's contending, virtually every team that's contending, and that's a high seed, they have a large number of players who have moved up. And, I think that's just the reality of where we are. I'm for it. All of us look for better opportunities in life, and I don't have any problem with the players moving up too. But, it probably does come at the expense of, it will be rare to see multiple Cinderellas make it to the Sweet 16, or more rare than it's been.
Okay, you guys obviously seen that. You guys obviously heard that. NIL is a problem. NIL, if unregulated, is definitely a problem. There's a reason why it is I did not choose to include Whitlock's bit in here, because if I chose to put Whitlock's bit in here, the video would be much, much longer. And of course, some of it's playing in the B-roll footage, but he discusses stuff like, say, globalism, left-wingers, vulture capitalism, taking over the game. Of course, he talks about bad contracts a little bit too. I'll just link the full episode in the description box. Very, very interesting watch, especially the first 30 minutes of the program. But still, though, the point is this right here. All the points on NIL being a problem are, in fact, valid. They are absolutely 100% warranted. Bad contracts, the possibility of them choosing the bigger programs over all programs, the fact that they're trying to make it much, much harder for teams that are, at the bottom of the totem pole, their inability to compete, or they're trying to make it harder for them to compete by rounding up all the talent and paying these guys all this money and whatnot. And of course, some of these contracts are in fact bad. These points are in fact valid. However, I got to agree with Reese Davis on one particular issue, and it's this right here. Well-coached teams, even if they are lower seeds, can in fact beat higher-seeded teams, even in today's environment, if they are well-prepared and well-coached. So I don't believe that the Cinderella story is fully dead, but that right there does lead me to another conversation. But what about NIL itself, and how exactly do we even get here? Well, let me just say this right here. Looking at Ed O'Banion's case, you probably think to yourself, well, this right here is the thing that sparked NIL. No, it doesn't. The thing that actually sparked NIL, or if you guys want to see where it really came about, and I'm pretty sure it even happened before this little event here, was probably the Fab Five, 1992-1993 Michigan Wolverines basketball team. They went to 2 NCAA championship games. They lost both of them. Like I said, I may have said it before, I got to kind of take a dig at them, politely take a dig at them. But those were some extremely talented teams. C. Webb, you had, who else? Jalen Rose. You had Juwan. Yeah. That team right there was a pretty good team. It's a shame they did not win a title. And it goes back to the very end of the documentary, which I advise you guys check out. It's on Netflix. It's on Disney+. Just look for Fab Five, and you'll find it. It talks about how it is that Chris Webber is looking at his jersey, his name, his likeness on the back of a mannequin in a store in Detroit, and he asked the question, why am I not getting any money? Now, that conversation, whether college basketball players should get paid or not, that right is a different conversation altogether. And my take on that right there would be very, very interesting, kind of a weird take, but still at the same time, though, I have a problem once you start getting donors and once you start getting big name alumnus involved. Then that right there is when the system becomes 100% fully corrupted, when this entire situation could be fixed if you had an actual balance set of rules in place that would prevent something like, say, NIL becoming a problem. I mean, seriously, go look at the videos that I'm going to have linked in the description box, because even the players themselves are getting hoodwinked by the contracts. They think they're getting a lot of money. They think they're getting a lot of, I'll put it this way here. They think that they are set But in reality, they don't seem to realize that they are no longer playing for the name on the back of the jersey. They're not even playing for the institution anymore. It seems more to me like they're playing for something else, not exactly related to what would actually be good for them. But that, brother, is another video for another day. Make sure you guys please hit the like button, subscribe, share the video stuff in the comments. I would love to get you guys' thoughts on this, and I'll see you guys later.